Good morning, Facebook friends and family. Hope everyone's doing well, staying safe, staying warm. So I wanted to touch on a topic. It has to do with the specification of your power unit. There's two different videos that kind of develop a couple different comments, and the comments come up all the time, especially with the hotshot guys. And you know, they argue it, they contest it, and you know, every time I've commented, they think I'm wrong, and they think I'm wrong because they're not seeing an immediate consequence of my opinion. And that's fine. And if it works for them, you know, great. But I did a video, I just uploaded it yesterday regarding my Mack trucks, kind of why I purchased them and why they were a fit for us at the time. And during the course of the video, I did comment that, you know, had I known then what I know now, you know, the same old question, the same old Murphy's Law, right? Had I known then what I know now, but had I known when I purchased them that I was going to put some of them, I can speak, ladies and gentlemen, I can, I promise. Had I known I was going to put some of them over the road long haul, I may have made a different purchase. You know, they're different beasts to an extent. I wish they would have a few more amenities. I'm not really a TV watcher, and so I don't really care if I have a TV or not. And honestly, most people don't even watch TVs anymore. Most truckers now have iPads, and you don't really miss much with an iPad anymore. But getting back to the topic, it boils down to gear ratios, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. So the truck I'm in, what I particularly liked about them is it's got, and all of them have 13 speeds, but the last couple batches I purchased had double overdrive 13s. And what happens when you have a double overdrive is they sacrifice a little bit the spacing of the gears on the low side. They're spread out a little more, but there's a vehicle there with its lights flashing and its batteries are going dead, so you can, no, actually its batteries aren't going dead, they're snow covered, the lights are. That driver needs to get out and clean them. Safety tip, guys, in the snow like this, before you head out, wipe down your reflective tape and your lights. I know it won't last long, but it can save your life. Coming from the oil field, that was something, especially when it got rainy, muddy, you know, we always had the drivers wipe that down, because someone will come up on you doing 60 and you're stuck on the side of the road and they can't see you. Anyway, so I'm trying to stay on topic and it's not working. So this particular truck has 330 gear ratios. My low gear in this is a really low gear, and first is almost like low in some other transmissions, and then the spread is kind of wide. But I believe Mack thought this would be okay because the engine in these things develop torque at a really low RPM, and that's kind of what the nature of the video is, the sweet spot for your engine relative to your torque. And so the net result for this truck, let me just finish that point, is right now, because of the snow and the possible ice and everything, I'm going a little bit slower than normal. Right now I'm doing 59. But as you can see, you know, I at any given moment can encounter ice, and I'm just taking it slower and easier. Right now I just slowed a little bit to 55. And I'm doing 1100 RPM. This truck develops 1,850 foot-pounds of torque right at 1100 RPM. And so although the engine's lugging a little bit and my exhaust gas temperatures are starting to climb, I'm at 725 right now, which is still well within its safe operating zone. This engine will run all day long at 1125. We kind of crested that little hill, so I'm back up to 60. Basically, I wasn't paying attention, and I'm not running the cruise control because of the possibility of slick conditions. You know, if I feel the wheels start to spin, I'll get out of the throttle immediately, whereas the cruise control may not. Anyway, so when you buy a semi-truck, especially when you buy one used, you need to be really aware of your running gear and its gear ratios. Now, my particular setup is not optimal. What manufacturers and the large fleet carriers have learned is your most fuel efficient powertrain setup comes from a transmission whose final drive is a 1-to-1, in other words, a non-overdrive, and they go higher ratio-wise, not numerically, lower numerically, higher ratio-wise on the rear end ratios. And so 280, you know, and even higher is the norm now. And I know some of the old school truckers are going to say, "Oh no, you'll never climb hills," and you know that's not a good ratio combination. We're talking about over the road. We're talking about trucks that go cross country on a regular basis, and you spend less than 3% of your time climbing hills. Now, if you're, you know, in the Northwest and you're pulling a logger trailer up and down them hills and you're in the dirt roads, yes, you know, 430 gear ratios are for you. You know, your stop and start, off-road conditions, always climbing hills, that makes perfect sense. But for someone like me, you know, cruising down the highway, such as now, doing just under 1200 RPMs at 60 miles an hour, this is optimal. This is what you want. There's no need to be running my engine at 1500 RPM to hit my cruise speed. And so part of the reason for the video is there are guys in the hotshot groups that run F450s and F550s, and they're running 430 gear ratios. And so to give you an idea, your 430 gear ratio, let's just talk about the Ford for now. So your 430 gear ratio, if you want to cruise 70 miles an hour, you're running that engine at 2100 RPM. And so I've looked at that engine's dyno chart. Now granted, it's the publicized dyno chart. It's not the chart that, you know, that comes off of someone that's trying to performance tune it. So that engine develops maximum torque at 1600 RPM. It develops maximum horsepower at 2600 RPM. And so running down the highway at 70 miles an hour, these guys are running 2100 RPM, which is well on the high side of peak torque, and it's running towards peak horsepower. And so just to be clear, torque is the rotational force that an engine can create. And kind of a silly way to put it for us truckers, torque reflects how big of a job you can do. How much weight can you move? It takes torque to move weight. Horsepower is what speed you can do that at. Now, some of you are thinking, well, I want to be able to go 70, I need speed. Yes, but if you have the right engine for your job, your torque at 1600 RPM should be able to do it. And so if Ford and its engineers, in its infinite wisdom, could not create a package where your truck can do 1600 RPM at 70 miles an hour, towing the trailer that you want to tow, then you have the wrong truck for the job. You are, with gear ratios, creating the torque you don't have with your engine. I referred to an F450 as a city tractor. You know, even though it's not a city tractor, it's the equivalent. We guys that are over the road and have been in the trucking industry for a while, we know what a city tractor is. And so, you know, a city tractor is basically a truck that has been equipped with a lighter duty powertrain, but to offset the lighter duty, they run a deeper gear ratio and they use the light duty powertrain to save weight, because they're typically running a little 2-axle tractor to pull a trailer around town. 9 times out of 10, they're doing, you know, like beverage service, or they're delivering to grocery stores. And so those types of trucks will typically have, like, you know, a 9-liter motor, and it's still pulling, you know, 50-some thousand pounds around town doing stop and go traffic. And so the F450 is the equivalent to that. Low gear ratios, small power plant, well outside of its torque curve to meet the speed requirement that you have trying to make a schedule running cross country. And so if you own one of these things, how fast are you going at 1600 RPM rolling down the highway? And now understand, that's your actual cruise speed. Anything above that, you're racing your engine. And so it's kind of hard to like put it all into a very simple context, but I'm going to slow down here a little bit for the sake of kind of a better demonstration. And so at 55 right now, I'm doing about 1125 RPM. So now I'm going to drop a gear. And of course, I did it at a bad time because I'm kind of on a little bit of an uphill. So let me finish climbing this hill. By the way, I'm climbing the hill, you know, at 1200 RPM. And again, the engine's doing it. It's not accelerating, but it's not losing speed. Why? Because there's enough torque there. And so, okay, we're back at 55, and because I split the gear, we're doing 1300 RPM. I'm going to drop another half gear. Now I'm doing 1500 RPM. Still doing 55. Now I'm going to split another gear, so now I've gone down 2 whole gears. Now I'm doing 1800 RPM. Oh, I take that back. Now I'm doing 1900 RPM, running 55. And so this is the equivalent to what your F450 is doing. And so I'm going to switch my little trip gauge here over to my fuel efficiency. See if I can get that up easily. So my instant trip data, we're going uphill again, so this isn't a fair comparison. But of course, in this low gear, I'm not losing even a half a mile. The boost just climbed, and you know, my gauges are telling me I'm not in a fuel efficient range anymore. But of course, I'm doing 1900 RPM, pulling 30 pounds of boost. But I'll get back to it here when I crest this hill, and it'll be kind of a better explanation, I suppose. So, but you can probably hear the engine in the video. I hope it's picking it up. But you can hear the engine. I'm doing 1900 RPM, doing 55. This is equivalent to what the F450s are doing rolling down the highway. And so what you F450 guys are missing is this. I'm about to split, so according to my instant fuel gauge, it's telling me I'm doing 4.7 miles to the gallon. So there's a split. I'm at 16, it just climbed to 5.5. Now I'm gonna do a full gear down to low. I'm at 1400 RPM. It's telling me now that I'm at 6.7. And now I'm gonna drop again. So now I'm in 13th, which is in this truck a double over. Now at 55, I'm doing 1200 RPM and I'm getting 7.8 miles to the gallon. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a no-brainer. There's no torque at 1900 RPM. It's all horsepower. It's all fuel making that power. And so right now my fuel gauge continues to tell me I'm at 7 and change. And I've actually sped up a little bit just by pedal. And so that's the difference, guys, when you're running your F450 with those 430 gear ratios and you think it's a great truck. Well, it feels great, but it's killing your checkbook and you don't even know it. You have the wrong application for what you're doing. You picked the wrong tool for the application is a better way to put it. No one's saying it can't do it. No one's saying it won't last, but you're kind of being cheated. They gear ratioed you to death to create that. Anyway, enough about that. I hope this video is informative and it helps some of you guys understand gear ratios and specifications are very important, even for the over-the-road trucks. You know, when you go buy a used truck, you need to be really careful you get the right spec for what you're trying to do. You can have two identical trucks sitting side by side, but one of them was geared for a vocational application. Let's just say it was set up to pull end dumps, so it crawls in and out of rock quarries daily. It's a lot of start and stop traffic, and it doesn't sustain speeds over 65 for long periods of time. So it may have 377s, even 410s in it, versus a truck that runs over the road that was geared to get, 7+ miles to the gallon. That truck may have, like this one, 330. It may have 280s, and it doesn't sound like a really big deal, but when you're doing 700-800 miles a day, the difference between 4.5 miles to the gallon and 7.5 miles to the gallon is very substantial. When you road test these things, you definitely want to get one up to your ultimate cruise speed and take a look at what your RPM are at the speed you believe you're going to be cruising at. If it's 65, then take a look at that and then compare your RPM to a publicized dyno chart for that engine. Most manufacturers make them available, and you want to be on the lower end of your peak torque. Most of your newer engines have very flat torque curves. In other words, the top is a plateau. It's not like your older engines where it was kind of like a hill. It would climb, peak, and drop. Now they climb, plateau, stay there for several hundred RPM, and then drop. You don't want to catch it on the tail end of the peak or on the drop end of the peak. You want it to be closer to the bottom or the beginning of that plateau. I stated it the other day to someone. Your pickup truck engines, the smaller displacement ones, typically around 1600 RPM is their sweet spot. Your bigger displacement engines, it's closer to 12, between 12 and 1300. Your newer ones with turbo compounding, those are even lower. those can literally now cruise as low as 1,100, 1,000 to 1,100. I know the newest ones, when they're automatics especially, they allow those things to lug all the way down to 1,000 RPM. And I know for guys like me that were taught how to drive decades ago, we were always told, keep your RPMs up, keep your EGTs down. It's different now, and it's even taken me a little bit of getting used to this idea that you want to lug the engine, and truth be told, higher EGTs actually now equates to cleaner emissions. And so I've noticed with this truck, if I can keep my exhaust gas temperatures in the 700 range, it doesn't ask for a regen as often. When I tend to keep them lower, it's constantly asking for a regen. Anyway, this video's gotten long enough. I hope it's informative, helpful. As always, thanks for watching.